I'd like to call the Ways and Means Committee meeting to order on December 7th, 11 a.m. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Alderman Boyd,
Present.
Alderman Vaquero,
Present.
Alderwoman Howard, Alderwoman Spencer,
Present.
Alderwoman Boyd, Alderman Muhammad,
Here.
Alderman Oldenburg, Alderwoman Navarro,
Here.
Alderwoman Middlebrook,
Present.
Alderwoman Evans, Chairwoman Davis.
Present.
7 present, you have quorum.
Thank you very much. Our agenda today is short, but very important. So what I'd like to do is to move forward and have, we got to approve minutes. I'm just running too fast. I'll accept a motion to approve our minutes, please.
So moved.
I move what date of the minutes, Madam Chair? Sorry.
November 4th.
Okay, I second.
It's been moved and second to adopt our minutes. Please call the roll.
Alderman Boyd,
Aye.
Alderman Vaquero,
Aye.
Alderwoman Howard, Alderwoman Spencer,
Aye.
Alderwoman Boyd, Alderman Muhammad,
Aye.
Alderman Oldenburg, Alderwoman Navarro,
Aye.
Alderwoman Middlebrook,
Aye.
Alderwoman Evans, and Chairwoman Davis.
Aye.
7 aye votes.
Thank you. So the first board bill that I'd like to bring before us for review is Board Bill 145. And I don't want to do that. I want to do Board Bill 118 committee for Board Bill 118. I'll do mine last, 145. So Alderman Todd, you have Board Bill 118.
Good morning, Honorable Chairwoman Davis and the Honorable Committee. Thank you very much for hearing my bill. This is a very simple bill. I will read the resolution. This is Board Bill number 118, Committee Substitute, introduced by Jesse Todd, an audience recommended by the Board of Estimate and Apportionment, wherein the Board of Aldermen authorized the receipt of an appropriate fund awarded by the U.S. Department of Labor relating to the YouthBuild Grant and containing an emergency clause. Whereas the U.S. Department of Labor awarded the YouthBuild Grant in the amount of $1,100,000 solely to the extent received to the City of St. Louis through its St. Louis Agency on Training and Employment. Whereas, for the purposes of carrying out the term and conditions of the grant, the city is appropriating $1,100,000. Be it ordained by the City of St. Louis as follows. Section 1. The city is hereby authorized to accept the U.S. Department of Labor's award of the YouthBuild Grant. The city, by and through its St. Louis Agency on Training and Employment, shall utilize and spend the funds for certain purposes substantially in accordance with Exhibit A, which is attached hereto and incorporated herein by reference. Section 2, the city hereby appropriates the U.S. Department of Labor's award of $1,100,000 to the St. Louis Agency on Training and Employment slate for the YouthBuild Grant. The director of slate is hereby authorized to make, negotiate, and execute any and all contracts or other documents on behalf of the city which are necessary to expend such funds and to expend such funds for the purposes allowed by the U.S. Department of Labor for the YouthBuild Grant. The comptroller is authorized and directed to issue warrants upon the city treasury for payment thereon. Section 3, emergency clause. This being an audience appropriated for emergency funding for current expenses of the city's government, it is hereby declared to be an emergency. Measure within the meaning of section 19 and 20, article 4 of the charter of the city of St. Louis, and shall become effective immediately upon its passage and approval by the mayor. As I said, this is a very, we're asking, the mayor's office is asking for $1,100,000 for slate, and this will help our city. And so that's what the bill is. And so I'm asking that returning this back to the chairwoman, and she can direct me as to how to proceed.
Yes, sir. So I understand you have a committee substitute.
Yes, ma'am.
So would you like to move to put that in front of us, please?
I thought this, okay, I thought this was the, well, I will, do you want the, well, the board bill at first was, the original one was asking for 80,000. And this is, and you want me to, I have it.
You just read the committee substitute.
Yes,
and
ma'am.
what I'd like for you to do is to move to put that in front of the committee.
Yes, ma'am. I move that this.
Point of order.
Go right ahead, sir.
Madam Chairman, I don't think the Alderman from the 18th is on the committee, is he?
He is not on the committee. I'm asking, he is the sponsor of the bill. I'm asking him to make a motion. And you know what? He can make his own motion for his bill.
Right.
But if you would prefer that a committee person do it, then that's okay.
Yeah, I'd move to put Board Bill 118 committee substitute before the committee.
And I'll second that. And
Thank you
previous
both.
role.
Hearing no objection to previous role, we now have Board Bill 118 committee substitute in front of us. I think that you have read the bill. I will go ahead and ask committee people if they have any questions of you. And I noticed that you don't have, oh, wait a minute. You do have, you have one person that would like to speak on behalf of the board bill. So let's double check and make sure that your speaker is here first. Is Frederica McGowan present?
I am present, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. I'm going to ask you if you affirm that the information that you're going to provide is true.
Yes, Madam Chair, that is correct.
All right, thank you. Could you identify yourself, who you represent, and if you are only representing yourself, the block that you live in the city? Thank you.
Madam Chair, I am Frederica McGlown, Executive Director of Slate.
All right. So you're going to speak on behalf of Slate.
I am, Madam Chair.
All right, go right ahead, please.
All right. So, good morning, everyone. YouthBuild St. Louis City provides an opportunity for young adults between the ages of 16 to 24 years old who have dropped out of high school the opportunity to return and obtain their high school equivalency through Slate's partnership with St. Louis Public Schools AEL to obtain their high school equivalency and a certification in construction through Rankin Technical College. Our program is set to service 64 young adults who possess a variety of barriers that have temporarily inhibited their success. YouthBuild is their second chance of changing not only the trajectory of their lives, but the lives of their families and those around them. In addition to educational and vocational courses, our program also assists with post-secondary educational exploration and career placement opportunities while addressing areas such as financial literacy and empowerment, mental health and coping skills, job readiness training, conflict resolution, soft skills training, civic engagement and involvement, and a host of other areas that are pertinent to our young people's academic, personal, and professional success. It is crucial that our program begins in January 2022 to ensure the success of our students and ensure we meet the requirements of completion as outlined by the Department of Labor in our grant. Therefore, a start date of January 2022 would successfully allow 3 cohorts of students to complete the program with a year of follow-up to successfully track their performance after graduation as required by the grant. It is also crucial that this bill is passed today to ensure that we are in sync with the beginning of both St. Louis Public Schools and Rankin semesters to ensure we have instructors for our students to begin their studies. Finally, it is crucial that this bill is passed today because we have actively recruited our first cohort of students who are waiting in the wings and are eager to transform their lives. And without program activity, this could result in scholars becoming idle, disengaged, and no longer interested in participating in the program. YouthBuild St. Louis City boasts that when this grant was first received in 2015 by our agency, it graduated more youth than any other YouthBuild program in our state and held competitive numbers in our region, received high accommodations from the Department of Labor, and was a national best practice in numerous areas. Therefore, we are eager to resume this program and are grateful for our allocation of $1.1 million from the Department of Labor, and we are ready to begin to transform and impact the lives of those who enter through the power of education and training. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. I'll now go through the committee and ask if you have any questions. Alderman Boyd.
Yes, I'm curious as to know what are the expected measurable outcomes for this grant?
So expected measurable outcomes, we talk about high school equivalency attainment. We also talk about placement and employment. YouthBuild is a pre-apprenticeship opportunity, so we are funneling our youth into construction apprenticeships. Also, we want to take a different direction this time as well in serving as a pipeline to city employment. That is something that is key for us as well. We talk about measurable skills gained. A lot of our students come into our program sometimes, Alderman Boyd, and they are at a 5th grade reading level. And so when we talk about measurable skills gained, seeing them at a 7th grade reading level, an 8th grade reading level, getting them to the point where they can attain their high set. So when we talk about performance outcomes, we're talking about a high school credential, we're talking about measurable skills gained, and placement and employment.
Okay, but can you talk about measurable goals? I mean, how many kids, or not kids, but how many young adults are we planning on serving? How many you expect to, successfully complete, the GED process? How many you expect to actually be employed? You're tracking them, I guess, for a year. Is that what I heard you say?
So a year after graduation. So as I stated in my spiel, we are serving 64 young people. So as according to the grant, there's 64 young adults. We have the expectation that 75% of them will attain their high school equivalency because we are allowed 25% of them to come into the program without their high school diploma, but are looking to increase in their TABE scores or increase in their math or their reading of that nature. We are hoping that 80% of those 64 students obtain either post-secondary education or employment.
Yeah, and so YouthBuild years ago when I first heard it was pretty much like a construction career apprentice program. So it sounds like you guys are moving beyond just construction. So if they complete this program, they don't necessarily have to get a job in construction. Is that right?
They don't, Alderman Boyd. They can get a job pretty much in any area that they choose to, but because this is a pre-apprenticeship in construction, we do push heavily on construction and filtering them into hopefully more ranking programs beyond their completion in the YouthBuild program, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and what's the age group again?
16 to 24 years old.
16 to 24. Okay, well, thank you. No further questions.
Thank you, Alderman Boyd.
Thank you. Alderman Vaccaro.
I do have a couple of questions for you. So your success rate in the past was what you were saying, 75%? Is that, or maybe I was misunderstanding it.
Yeah.
So do the students get paid to go there? Or do they go there because they want to, you know?
So yes, Alderman, so they get what we call work experience dollars. So they do a couple of things in the program. One of those things that they do is they get the opportunity to work on a house. And so they go out to a work site for 3 months and they work on a house. And so while they're out working on their work site, Alderman, they get compensated what we call work experience dollars. And it's a small amount where they get paid for the hours that they work on their house for those 3 months. They also get some incentives throughout the program. The first 2 weeks of the program, they go through a process called mental toughness. And that is an interview to determine suitability for the program and if this is the program that they indeed want to go through with. So we provide them a small incentive as well. Also, as they reach certain milestones in the program, we provide them a monetary incentive as well. If they get their high school equivalency or if they gain employment or post-secondary education, they'll get a small incentive as well. So yes.
So I was curious. I mean, and certainly I'm going to support the bill. A long time ago, I used to teach somewhat like this, but it was always somewhat frustrating that some of the students were getting paid, but they also were allowed to miss, you know, so much time during each module of what we taught, you know, and they would take it to the max, you know, on missing days. So, so say you're working on GED, do they get paid then for going to the GED classes to learn?
They do not get paid for attending the high set classes. They do not. But one of the things that we press upon the importance that this program provides is extensive case management. So each young person in our program will have access to a case manager who will ensure their success, ensure that they get to school, follow up with them, home visits and things of that nature. So attendance has not been a problem for us in the past when we talked about this program, because you provide a caring adult for them that holds them accountable and ensures that they remove all barriers to ensure their success.
That sounds good. It sounds really good. That was just my curious questions. And I do think if they're working on a job building something, they should get some sort of compensation. Plus, it makes you feel like you're earning something for your work. I understand that. So anyway, well, God bless. Thank you so much. That was all I had.
Thank you, Alderman.
Okay. Alderwoman Spencer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have no questions. I just I'm grateful that we're moving forward with this.
All right, thank you. Alderwoman Boyd.
No questions, thank you.
Okay. Alderman Muhammad.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have no questions, but I do want to commend the leadership of Slate for all the work that they are doing. But I have no questions in correlation to this bill. I do support it. I believe I am a co-sponsor. If I'm not, Madam Assistant Clerk, please make sure that I am. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Alderman Oldenburg. Alderwoman Navarro.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman, and thank you, Ms. McLeod, for all your great work on this and pursuing this grant. I do just have a couple of questions to make sure that I'm understanding the kind of the process here. So did you say, is this a renewal or a continuation, or is this a brand new grant?
So we've had the grant before, and that grant cycle ended. So we went ahead and reapplied again, and we were awarded the grant again. So this would be new.
Okay. Okay. So that was one question. So in the fiscal, and which is great. I think that's always wonderful when the federal government says, yes, you know, we think you're doing a great job. Here's another $1 million. The fiscal note made it sound like this was not, funding for this was not in the budget before. And maybe that's just how this works in terms of how it gets reflected in the budget. But if it's all clear on the back end with the paperwork, that's fine with me. But I just wanted to make sure I was understanding that correctly. And then it does, the fiscal note does mention matching grants. Is there a match required for this, and who's providing those matches?
So we are receiving matches from Rankin, and we're receiving matches from SLDC at the moment.
Okay. So from SLDC. Okay, so do they seek other funding for those, or is that just comes out of the pot of money that SLDC has?
Yes, so the match that they're providing is in the amount of $150,000, and this will help with worksite materials for the young people. So when they go out and build the houses, the supplies and things that they'll need to be able to do that will be provided as well, along with the match that Rankin provides will help with those costs as well.
Okay, thank you. And then what's the term of this grant? It looks like October 21 was kind of when it went into effect. Is it a 12-month cycle?
So no, this was awarded July 1 of 2021 until October 31st of 2024.
Oh, okay. All right. And okay, and it's a reimbursable grant, right? Is what you said. So as we incur the cost, then we ask for the funds from the feds. Correct.
Yes.
Okay. Cool. Great. Thank you. I know these federal grants, I mean, I've applied for them before. I've had to report on them, and they take so it's very tedious. So thank you so much for all of your work on this. I think it's really beneficial to the city. So thank you. I have no more questions.
All right, thank you. Alderwoman Evans. So I just wanted to have a few comments. YouthBuild is one of those programs that I think we've been operating it in the city about 35 years now. But it really brings an individual to a place of understanding their worth and believing in themselves and getting real on-the-job training. It is a wonderful thing. The next time you go to the Walgreens on Lafayette, when you look to the east, YouthBuild, those row houses, YouthBuild renovated those. It's they've been all over the city, and I just love the program. I put it up there with high marks with Habitat, so it's really, really good. Alderman Boyd, I return to you. I'm not Boyd. Alderman Todd, I return to you for closing on this.
I've heard some very positive comments. I got my start in Slate as a youth, and so I know Slate can certainly this as it has done in the past in the Poverty Program many years ago. We saved many kids, and this program will save young men and women. Now, 16 to 24 is where we have the lack of experience in many cases with our youth. They mean well, but they need to be involved and engaged under supervision most times, even though they don't realize it. Also, they are getting a stipend that is good. They are busy, they are learning a skill, they're getting their GED. It's a win-win situation. This program can teach skills, build families, because ranking, I think it's for every person, sometimes it's for jobs. And then this program leads into the city for employment for those. And then also it exposes them to ranking, which guarantees once you graduate, you're guaranteed a job. So we're talking about a lifetime job that you can take care of your family and skills that you can take into place. So again, I want to thank the Honorable Chairwoman, as well as the committee, for taking your precious time to hear this YouthBuild bill.
All right, the chair will entertain a motion on Board Bill 118 Committee Substitute.
Madam
So
Chair, I
moved.
move that we pass Board Bill 118 Committee Substitute with a due pass recommendation.
I'll
Okay,
second, I'll
So was-
second that. And
It was
answer
moved
previous role.
second. And can I go back to the Alderman for the 21st Ward? Can you put your screen on very briefly so that we can identify. Alderman?
Yes, ma'am. Madam
Oh, there we
Chair,
go.
a motion that we pass Board Bill 118 with a due pass recommendation.
All right,
Max
thank you, sir.
seconded in previous role.
Okay, hearing no objection, Board Bill 118, committee substitute, has been approved with a due pass recommendation. I thank you so much.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, committee. And I thank you very much.
All right, we'll move on now to Board Bill 145. And I'm going to ask if Alderman Boyd would handle the committee for me while I move this bill. Alderman Boyd?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Let me just get my agenda back up here. We're on Board Bill 145. Okay. Madam Chair, you're recognized on Board Bill 145.
Thank you very much. Board Bill 145 is the opportunity for the city to issue bonds on behalf of capital improvements that are needed for the city. We have representation from the Comptroller's Office, and what I'd like to do now is to turn it over to the team that's available to give us all the answers. And LaTanya Kenner is leading that team. And LaTanya, I want to turn it over to you to explain in detail the board bill, its purpose, why we're doing it now, and please interject your team members as you need them with introduction. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Chair, members of the Ways and Means Committee, first of all, good morning. My name is LaTanya Kenner, and I serve as Deputy Comptroller for the Finance and Development in the Comptroller's Office. Today, we have Board Bill number 145, a board bill requesting authorization from voters to issue general obligation bonds not to exceed $50 million. The last time we visited the Ways and Means Committee to request this authorization was back in 2018, and before then, 2016. So I would have to say that this is a normal course of business for our office. And we are here today to present the big picture this morning in hopes that the Ways and Means Committee will pass this board bill out of committee. Ryan Coleman, Fiscal Officer 2 of our office, is with us this morning, and I'm going to ask Ryan to put a PDF up on the screen to show our capital needs at this morning before I begin. Okay, so what you have before you is the total amount of capital improvement needs that was vetted by the Citizen Advisory Board and the Capital 2 Committee back in probably, I would say, September and October. So if I go through the category needs at this point in time, thank you, Ryan. It was assessed that the city of St. Louis has approximately $178 million in critical needs, approximately $201.9 million in needed, which are improvements that are needed, but will not hinder operations, and approximately $56 million in desirables. And these are definitely items that do not impact our operations. But I want to go back to the needed items, $201.9 million in needed, but they are not as critical as the $178 million, which provides us a total of $436 million in capital improvement needs as of October 2021. In our capital committee, there was a proposal and a board bill which was approved by the capital committee for an ARPA funding appropriation of $67.5 million of those capital needs to be met and appropriated at some point in time. There was also $16.4 million from our city's capital fund. There was $1 million from the EcoDevo public safety infrastructure account. And also there will be an additional tranche of ARPA funding coming soon or in the next fiscal year. And if we were just even to take approximately $125 million of that tranche, that would still leave us today with capital needs in the amount of $226 million unfunded. So with that stated, the sources that we have today will still not be sufficient to meet our city's capital needs. So there is a gap. And what we want to do is position the city of St. Louis to fund our capital improvement needs in a timely manner. So the board bill that you have in front of you, the purposes that are listed in this board bill, I will state those purposes: resurfacing arterial streets and bridges, design and construction of a public safety answering point, which is known as PSAP, a new state-of-the-art emergency operations center, combining fire, EMS, SEMA, Citizen Service Bureau. This board bill will also provide purposes for designing and construction of pedestrian and bicycle transportation facilities, maintaining the safety and security of the jails and improving public safety, providing a local match where applicable and necessary, replacing, improving, renovating, maintaining our buildings, bridges, and equipment of the city of St. Louis, including our recreation centers and firehouses, and any expenses associated with the issuance of the bonds. So those are the purposes that's stated in the board bill. As you know, after we request the authorization from the voters, we will come back to the Board of Alderman Ways and Means Committee at the time that we deem appropriate to issue those bonds. And we will also have a list of better defined projects that are needed to fund at that point in time. When you look at benefits today, as far as timing of this ballot issue, we're asking the voters for approval in April because it provides, number one, a cost savings. We will not have to pay for a separate ballot initiative because of the issue that's already stated for April. Is, in my opinion, timely because we do not have to come before the Ways and Means Committee in the middle of the budget process or the budget season. And it provides another source to maximize the utilization of our federal funds when it comes to our local match. As part of this team, I have asked Rebecca Perry-Glickstein, which is the city's financial advisor, to have comments regarding this board bill. After Rebecca, we also have Charles Salisbury, which is the city's bond counsel. So I'm going to turn it over to Rebecca at this time.
Good afternoon. Hope everyone can hear me. My name is Rebecca Perry-Glickstein. I'm a director at PFM Financial Advisors, LLC. We are a financial advisor to the city as it relates to its debt management and capital formation. As LaTanya indicated, as has always been the case, the city's capital needs, far outstrip available sources of revenue to fund those capital needs. The general obligation bond program has long been a component of the puzzle that is, how do we fund our capital needs? As LaTanya mentioned, in 2016 and 2018, we came before this committee, the Board of Aldermen, seeking authorization to put a general obligation bond ballot question on upcoming election. And what we do is we are seeking and have sought in 16 and 18 and again today to issue general obligation bonds on a no levy increase basis. So currently there are outstanding general obligation bonds of the city, about 73 million. Those bonds are paid off through property tax levy that is specific to debt service. We have consistently over the last many years maintained the levy at a certain level. And as AV, assessed value of the properties in the city increases, and as debt service from previously issued bonds starts to roll off and dwindle, we have tried to achieve authorization for additional additional issuance so that we can maintain the general obligation bond program as a part of the overall funding strategy for the city. And that is what we are doing now. We're at a point where the assessed value and the level of debt service has coalesced such that we now have some room under the existing levy to issue additional general obligation bonds. LaTanya showed a capital needs list of some 436 million, discussed other sources of funds that are currently available to a certain extent. Is yet to be determined how much the city would choose to put towards capital versus other uses for those funds, some of them federal, some otherwise. But this request, we're requesting 50 million for authorization. Anticipate that the first issue would be around 20 million, because again, we won't be issuing bonds such that the debt service would cause the levy to increase. We're trying to maintain a consistent levy of, or a consistent level of levying for property owners, and a consistent level of kind of the GO bond program participating in the capital formation to the extent that we can get that done. I think it's, just want to reiterate what LaTanya also said, that this board bill is seeking authorization to put the question on the ballot for voters to approve. If we receive that approval, we will still need to come back to the Board of Aldermen and this committee for each specific bond issue that would be done pursuant to that authorization. So it might be 20 million next year, and then in a couple more years as the levy, as the assessed value and the debt service allows, another piece of would be done as GO bonds. But in every instance, we would come back to the Board of Aldermen, to this committee, to get specific authorization for that particular bond issue and a particular set of projects. We are coming before you now, as LaTanya said, so that we could try to be on the April ballot and hopefully get approval, so that going forward into the upcoming budget year, and also as more information becomes available on how the city will choose to deploy its ARPA funds, not only the first tranche, but the second tranche of that, as we get more information on what the federal infrastructure bill will look like. We will be able to be kind of a known component as the city seeks to put together, how it's going to allocate all of those funding sources. So that it is clear, for instance, if we get approval, there's a 20 million of general obligation bond capacity that we could put into the mix to address capital needs, and together with ARPA funding, potentially infrastructure funding, put together a capital funding package. I think it's also important to note that the intent of this strategy is to put the city in the position to be timely and nimble and able to access capital funds in an expeditious manner so that we're not somehow holding up a project or a program. For instance, match. You cannot match federal funding with other federal funds, right? Local match means just that. You need to come up with the money from someplace else. So we need to have those funds on hand to make that match. Also, the funds on hand to fund other projects that may not be eligible for funding elsewhere through ARPA or infrastructure, or the use of the ARPA or infrastructure money is not the best and highest use of those monies. I would point out that the bonds we're seeking to issue would be tax exempt general obligation bonds. General tax exempt debt is very limited as to its uses. And one of the things that you cannot do is fund operations or really non-capital formation projects. One of the things that ARPA, for instance, does is give a lot of latitude to stand up programs, to fund overtime, to make resources available to address the pandemic, to fund programs for the betterment of youth and other employment training programs. So we want to make sure that the city, when it's looking at the pantheon of the needs, both capital as well as programmatic, that will collectively move the city forward and set the city in good stead and allow the city to offer the broad array of services to its constituents that it is its responsibility, that all of the different funding sources are in place, ready to go, and the city can have full flexibility to use those dollars to the best and highest use. You might not want to use ARPA money to fund a capital project, but we choose to fund that capital project with GO debt because you can then use that ARPA money that you might otherwise have used for that capital project to do something that you simply cannot do with tax exempt debt. We're looking to expand the opportunities of the city. The city, as always, as most cities do, right? Everybody needs more money, not necessarily replacement money. So we're trying to be additive to the city's pot rather than switching out funds, because if you do that, then you end up with what you had before, and we know that what we've had before is simply not enough.
Thank you, Rebecca.
Yep, my pleasure.
We also have Charles Salisbury of Salisbury and Associates. Charles, would you like to add anything as bond counsel?
Yes, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to speak before this great committee. And I've been fortunate to have appeared before this committee in the past, and it's always been delightful. Ordinarily, with transactions such as the one we're talking about here, bond counsel does not get engaged at this stage. We generally come in closer to the time when you've already have your approval and now you're looking to actually issue your bonds. In this case, however, the comptroller's office through LaTanya and Ryan came to my firm early because they recognize the gravity and the serious nature of the times that we're in. And therefore they wanted to get me involved at this stage to make sure that everything was in order and proper. Because the city, the comptroller's office believes that the city needs to be in a position of flexibility and strength. Because notwithstanding the funding that may be coming to the city and states around the country, those funds are not going to necessarily repeat themselves anytime soon. As a result, organizations, municipalities need to really be careful on how they plan for the future and need to be mindful of keeping in place and advancing programs that up to this point have been effective providers of financing techniques for that entity. Thus, it's very important to keep afloat the general obligation bonds that we're talking about. I am very fortunate to have worked on the last two issues that have been discussed here. And the city is trying to maintain some continuity by keeping me involved and my firm involved as it moves through the next phase. So I'm delighted to be here and want to serve as a resource to the city as it puts in place as it responds to the times and puts in place capital funding programs to sustain it through the future. I might also say that the bill that you have in front of you needs a little bit of technical modifications. By that, I mean that we want to revisit and strengthen the project description so that when it comes time for bonds being issued, that we have the proper authorization. So you all will receive through this process a substitute bill at some point in the near future so that the city and the comptroller's office will have an opportunity to make sure that, for instance, all of the departments of the city who are affected here have had an opportunity to weigh in and to consider whether we've captured all of the projects that need to be considered here. So you will be receiving that in connection with the legislative process, that substitute bill in connection with the legislative process containing those minor but important changes that will need to be put in place before this bill becomes final. But again, it's a pleasure to work with you. It's a pleasure to help the city on this very important matter, and I look forward to seeing it all the way through. Thank you.
Thanks to both of you. Before I turn it over to Chairwoman Davis, I want to add one item that we have not brought to your attention. The city went before Moody's credit rating agency in August of 2021, and we presented this information to the credit rating agency that we would be going to ask for a no increase levy. And subsequent to our presentation to Moody's, within, I think it was at the end of August, the city did receive a credit rating upgrade. So I just want to leave that information with you also. And in closing, you also know and you're aware of the diligence of Comptroller Alderman Green that we will not issue any bonds at any time unless it is the appropriate time to issue those bonds. So I would like to request the approval from this committee to move this board bill number 145 out of committee. Thank you for your support.
Okay, Madam Chairwoman, you want to go around and ask questions now? Did you want to offer anything else before questions?
For me, I'll just simply say that this is a process that has taken place, and I've been a part of it for the last two previous ones, and that I did sit on the Capital Committee as we discussed the needs of the city and brought priority to some of them. And I do understand the need, and I do understand that the process does not bring any additional taxation to our community. And with that, sir, I will give it to you for questions.
Okay, let's take questions from the committee. Alderman Vaccaro.
Just a couple. What's the cost going to be to issue these? And the other, I know you say it doesn't add any additional, but if it doesn't pass, how much does it drop the assessments? Did that make sense on both questions?
Latanya, did you get that?
Yes, I did. I'm going to refer that to our financial advisor.
Hi, it's Rebecca again. So the first question is the question about the transaction cost, the cost to actually issue the
Right.
bonds.
Yes.
So preliminarily, I would say it would be in line with past issuances, maybe between $400,000 and $600,000. So that encompasses the fees for the various advisors, legal advisors, financial advisors, the paying agent, rating agencies, as well as the fee to the underwriter to actually market and sell the bonds. So that's a preliminary figure, but that's based on the 2018 transaction.
And the bonds, are they going to be issued from locally here, or is this going to be from somewhere else? I noticed a lot of times they go way out of town.
The financing team, the underwriting team has not been identified. I believe that the most recent issuance of GEO bonds, one was the remaining portion of the 2018 authorization that we did in 2 tranches, and then general obligation bonds for the Prop NS program, neighborhood stabilization, that those were in fact marketed and sold by a local firm, a local underwriting firm. I believe it was Stern Brothers. So I believe it's the controller's goal always to have as much local participation, both on the underwriting side as well as the legal advisory side and other kind of third-party providers in a transaction as possible.
And the other part of my question had to do with, if this does not pass, the chairwoman said that it's not going to increase the taxes, but if it fails, how much will the taxes decrease by? If the bond lapses, or we don't, it pays out.
Right. So and I want to come back with kind of more specific amount, but the bond levy right now is at 0.133, 1333, I believe, has been there for some time now. The levy may drop, so call it 13 cents, from 13 cents to 6 or 8 cents, and that will depend on the assessed value, how that performs going forward, right? As well as the roll off of existing debt. So, but it will, it will drop, I would say, precipitously. Without.
I mean, it's going to be tough to get any tax increase, or even, with the reassessments in the personal property tax. I mean, the average home in my neighborhood, we're paying over $3,000 on our home, and just one car alone my one car went up to over $1,000. So, anyway, I think you're going to have a tough time passing anything right now, but I'm going to move on. Those are my curious questions.
Alderman Vaccaro, I would like to interject.
Oh, sure.
The comptroller has maintained this tax levy for a number of years at the 0.1333. And I'm not sure, Rebecca, how many years we have been able to keep this rate consistent, but we're trying our best to keep it consistent so that we don't have to go back to the voters at a later point in time and ask for an increase. That's number one. If the rate does if it does decrease, it could affect our services or awarding or fulfilling the funding of capital needs at this current time. But my fear is that outside of funding the services, is that if it does decrease, going back to the voters later, it may not be approved. And that would affect our performance of services. So
I remember one that wasn't that many years back, that the world was going to come to an end if it didn't pass, and it did not pass. And the world didn't come to an end. But these are just,
I'm not saying that all the world would come to an end, but I'm saying that if it did not pass, we may have a more difficult time at a later date going back to the voters to ask for an increase in property taxes.
I guess after still in shock after getting my property tax and my personal property tax. And I can't be the only one in shock. I mean, I'm getting phone calls from constituents. How come this keeps going on? How come, and it basically they're the ones that keep voting stuff in. But anyway, I'm going to move on, but I appreciate everyone, but thank you.
Okay, Alderwoman Spencer.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I don't have any questions at this time. I may circle back here in a minute at the end. Thank you.
Okay. I want to remind members of the committee when you speak, if you could remember to turn your video on, that would be helpful.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My apologies.
Okay, Alderman Pam Boyd.
I'm trying to turn on my video per instructions to make sure I'm in compliance. The only question I'm having, because I heard Alderman Vaccaro, and so what I'm hearing, and if I'm off, just tell me. So we're saying we're asking the voters to vote on a bond, and that bond will increase the taxes, the assessment of properties for tax.
No.
Okay, that's
no,
what I'm for clarity.
No, this is a no increase.
No.
Bond issue.
No.
Okay.
That's the purpose of this board bill, is to keep it consistent and keep it at the same level.
Okay. Thank you very much for the clarity.
Yes, ma'am.
Alderman Muhammad. Not sure if he's still with us. Okay. Alderman Oldenburg.
No questions, Mr. Chairman. I want to just make a quick statement in support of this. We've done this a couple, 3 times now, and I think it works pretty slick where we are able to, through no tax increase, pay down previous bonds and then use that margin, if you will, to use access cheap capital to continue with the city's needs. And it's critically important that we use all sources that don't raise the taxes on resident taxpayer, including with the sources we know are yet to be appropriated from the federal government. So I do stand in support of this and plan to vote yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman.
Okay, Alderwoman Navarro from the 28th.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for the presentation today. I do have a couple of questions. Overall, I'm very supportive of this idea and recognize the immense needs in our city. The first question I have is, so if this were to pass, the 7 categories that are identified in the bill are where the money could be spent, but the specific amounts would be determined at a later date, I presume, based on the needs at that time, right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And then the other question I have is, it sounds like, according to Mr. Salisbury, there's going to be a substitute bill and there may be additional categories added. So I'm just curious what the timeline is is there, and if it makes sense to vote on this today, if we're expecting that there's going to be additional needs added. I guess I'm curious why we would be voting on this today if there's going to be a substitute bill in the future.
If I may, the changes that we're talking about are going to be refinements. We're not planning to add any projects, but there's some language changes I think that need to be put in place to make sure that the projects that are contemplated right now are actually captured. But you're not going to see any substantive changes. It's basically going to be some legal implications that we want to make sure are captured properly in the language. And you will see in the details of the changes that they're not going to be substantive to the tune of overriding what you might determine to do today. I think it is timely to pass on this bill, because what will happen beyond this will be non-substantive changes, but refinements.
If I could just add, this is Rebecca again from PFM. What we want to do, given that there are luckily, embarrassment of riches in terms of potential sources of funding for various capital projects between ARPA, infrastructure, the GEO bond program, hopefully, that we want the language in the board bill for the GEO bond ballot question to be, make sure it's sufficiently broad so that as it becomes, there's greater clarity around how the city is going to deploy ARPA funds, what infrastructure funding is going to look like, that we're not somehow creating a circumstance where we said, oh, we want to do this with GEO bonds, and it turns out we can do it with federal money, and that's a better use of that federal money. So we really want to, make sure that we've got sufficient flexibility, that we haven't written the uses too finely to not allow us to fully access the best and highest use of all of the various sources of funding. So as Charles said, they're not going to be wholesale changes, or we're not going to plop in some use that you've never seen before that isn't otherwise contemplated. We just want to make sure that as time passes and as we get to the place of, okay, we should issue the first tranche of GEO bonds, that we can issue those bonds for projects that need funding, that don't have funding from other places, or might be fundable from someplace else, but that would then short some other project or program where those other sources of money could be used where GEO debt, tax-exempt GEO debt cannot.
Okay, thank you. That makes a lot of sense. It does. I think earlier there, I thought I heard a comment though that we wanted to go back and talk to the departments and make sure we had included everything that was in there. But it sounds like you don't anticipate any additional projects. It's more just about the mechanism of issuing bonds more so than the categories or projects that would be funded. Is that? I just want to make sure I'm clear on that.
That is correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. I don't have any further questions.
Thank you.
Okay, Alderwoman Middlebrook.
Thank you. I have no questions.
Okay, Alderwoman Evans. Okay, I have a few questions. It almost sounds like to me we're asking for pre-approval from the voters, and then we'll come back and spend the money how we see fit, based on all the other pockets of money that we may have available. We may not spend the whole 50 million. I've kind of got a little confused.
So, LaTanya, if you want me to start, I can. So we are asking the voters to authorize, up to 50 million of general obligation bonds on a no levy increase basis. And we're trying to do it now with the April election so that we have that authorization in place as the city moves through the next budget cycle, the determination of how it's going to deploy the various sources of funding for capital and other programs, that we know that we have that piece. The authorization itself, to the best of my knowledge, does not sunset, right? So it will, if we get the authorization, it will be available. And as the city moves towards its capital plan for a year, what are our sources? At that time, we'll say, okay, we've got X from we owe A pot and Y from B pot, and now we've got some geo. We're going to use some geo also to complete that picture. It is, I think, highly unlikely that, given there is no sunset on the authorization, that the city would not end up issuing over time the full 50 million in geo bonds, because the needs are substantial now, and to the extent that they're not, every year kind of brings new needs. So what we're trying to avoid having happen is, let's say we move into 22 and there's this is the capital plan for 22, and these are the sources of funds, and be in a place where there's a project or there are projects that would be better funded with geo bonds, and that we don't have the authorization to issue those geo bonds. There's quite the lead time to get on the ballot. And then, as we've said, voters can hopefully approve the issuance, but then we still have a full another round of going back through this committee, the Board of Aldermen, to get approval for the specific bonds. So we're trying to put ourselves in a place that we can be nimble and timely and access capital as expeditiously as possible over a period of time. The constraint of this board bill is that it's a no levy increase authorization. So it's designed really to work over time, that as the levy revenue presents itself with that margin, that we can issue into that we're able to do that and do it fairly quickly, so that we can get projects funded and out underway and out the door. So I don't think we're kind of not asking for authorization just for the heck of it, and we might not use it. I think we're going to use it, and it will be over time because of the no levy increase constraint. But as it stands now, this is a relatively small amount, a small amount given the capital needs of the city. And I think it will be used. There will be projects that lend themselves to tax exempt general obligation bond funding versus funding from some other source.
Okay,
so answer.
So let me make sure I'm clear on exactly what we're doing. So you're saying you want to pass this, and then I guess it goes on the ballot. If the voters approve it, then you'll come back and get approval to spend the money in the different buckets that's been identified in the text, the different 7 categories or whatever.
Yes, it will be come back for the actual authorization to issue the bonds. This doesn't authorize us to issue bonds.
Okay, got it. Okay, I think I'm there now. Okay, so, but theoretically, we can come back several times for authorization. We up to 50, but we could do 10 1 month, and then a year later we could do 15 million, and so on and so forth.
Correct.
Okay, so let me ask you this, because sometimes those of us who don't trust the process all the time want certain things, and you kind of need to see them in the bill. I know some of my colleagues and I on the north side have been talking about Wold Community Center should be demolished and just rebuilt, for example. And I like the fact that there have been a little category that talks about rebuilding or replacing recreation centers, but there's several other little things in there. It's not just specific to recreation centers, but I think, you know, it would be helpful if we could say Woe Center and others. That way we know for sure that center will be rebuilt. And I think it would sell well, you know, to voters who would really like to see a brand new Woe Community Center up there, since we're saying that we could, you know, spend this money in order to do that. But what happens in the past, we ask the voters to do stuff and then we leave it broad, and then we don't do what we lead them to think that we're going to do because circumstances change. So could we put Woe Center in there, for example? Would that screw up the language for issuing bonds?
Alderman Boyd, I'm going to defer that item or your question to bond counsel.
Okay.
Charles, you're on
Mr.
mute.
Strawberry, you're muted.
Is that better?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, very good. Your question is extremely penetrating and it's come up a number of times in the context of general obligation bonds and other types of projects. My response back to you is that I think on the one hand, it would be logical to tell the voters about more specific projects, but it seems to me that at this point in time, keeping in mind that these bonds probably won't be issued, assuming that the voters approve the ballot by the ballot, these bonds wouldn't be issued until, you know, after April. And by that time, there could have been a number of financial interventions to the city that would cause the city to determine, well, perhaps that project isn't the one we need to focus on, but instead we need to focus on this other project, which, by the way, has had a catastrophe occur between now and that point. I think that as a city and as a board, I think you would be better off to have the flexibility to use these funds strategically and to take advantage of events that might occur. From a legal standpoint, you certainly could modify this board bill, modify the ballot, and include specific detailed language. That's entirely a prerogative of the legislative process. But my advice to you would be not to do that, because I think, particularly in these times, I think you need the flexibility to put the dollars where those dollars are needed at the time when you are going to try to access those funds. And therefore, I would try to keep that language loose. Now, when it comes to campaigning, if you will, or information that you might want to put out with regard to the electors when this is all coming up, if you're going to have any, for instance, public meetings where people can come in and ask questions, you can, at that point, describe the specific projects that you're talking about, but also with the caveat that I would respond to someone, a voter making a request. I would respond, yes, we are looking at that specific program and intend to fund that program and bring that particular project up to date. But we may choose as a city and as a finance unit to use the general obligation bond proceeds for something else, because we may be able to, in fact, finance that project that you're talking about, voter, cheaply or through the use of other funds that might not require the constraints of a tax exempt bond.
Okay, that makes sense. Two more questions. One of them is, I hate to say this, what's the hurry? What would make a difference whether we did this in April or August or November?
Well, if I may start.
Yes.
Well, as I said during my earlier remarks, the Comptroller's Office, they are looking at this whole package as being critical and as being timely. So they're doing things, the Comptroller's Office, they are engaging people at a very early stage, which they wouldn't have ordinarily done, because they are concerned about the city's finances, making sure that the city's finances, which as LaTanya alluded to earlier, is on an upward trend insofar as rating agencies. The city wants to make sure that that trend continues. And in order to make sure that that trend continues, the city needs to have in its coffers all of the tools that it could possibly obtain to be able to implement financing programs rapidly and as needed.
I think this might be, okay, I got it, Mr. Sullivan. I think this might be my last question. I just want to piggyback again on Alderwoman Navarro's question, because I just wasn't clear in your explanation about the substitute.
Okay.
It sounds like you want to make some technical corrections to the language. And if you want to do that, it should be done now and not after we pass this and then have to repeal it or amend it at a later date. Does that make sense?
I certainly understand what you're talking about there. But as an attorney, a municipal attorney, as well as a finance attorney, the changes that I'm talking about are not such that one could argue that you're passing the bill, you're directing this bill to the Board of Aldermen's coffers would be tainted in any way. The changes I'm talking about are really wordsmanship, because at this point, for instance, the business about roads and bridges that's in there. I think that language is proper, but I think the language could be tweaked a little bit better than it already is. As I said, the comptroller has gotten me involved at an early stage, but unfortunately, I wasn't involved at the very early stage when that bill was put together. And had I been, I would have already suggested some tweaks. But LaTanya asked me that very question that you just posed earlier, and I said to her, LaTanya, the language that I'm going to suggest is only language that will make this bill unambiguous to anybody that might read it, and all inclusive, so to speak. But the changes that I'm going to suggest are not such that it would taint the process that we're doing. Let me give you an example of one of the changes that I'd like to see put in. The bill right now refers to the tax regulations that need to be adhered to in order for the bonds to be issued on a tax-exempt basis. But that reference is not complete. It should say the Internal Revenue Code of 1986 as amended and the related tax regulations. Right now, it only says the regulations, but doesn't say the tax code. Now, for voters and for this body, that difference is not a substantive one to you, but when I have to give my legal opinion in April or May or June or whenever that comes up, I'm going to need to have the regulations and the tax code referred to in the document. So from your standpoint, that doesn't matter. The essence of what you're passing on to the Board of Aldermen is not changed, but I'm just trying to make sure that from a technical standpoint, all dots and T's are crossed. And by the way, the language that I'm referring to was the same language that was in the 2016 deal, the 2018 transactions. But we were still able to do the bonds. But here we have an opportunity of a municipal lawyer at an earlier stage. So let's get the language very tight and perfect. So
could I just
move on?
I'm sorry, Charles, just to add, just to maybe verify that my understanding of the timing is correct, is that the substitution would be, I think it's called a floor substitute, and that would be presented before, if the committee votes it out, would be presented, provided to the Board of Aldermen before the next meeting on this board bill. So it would not be the passage of 145 as it stands all the way through, the final passage, and then come back with a substitution. It would be between this committee meeting, to the extent that you pass it out, and the next, I guess it's the second reading of the full Board of Aldermen, which presumably is this Friday. So it would be, everyone would see it before this 145 gets, beyond the second reading. Is that the intent? So that's my understanding of what we were trying to do for this process. Charles.
That's my understanding as well, in which case the Board of Aldermen will have a complete up-to-date document to consider, as well as they will be briefed as to what the changes were, and people other than myself will not be concerned about what those changes, bond counsel types and tax type people would be concerned, but the Board of Aldermen, I don't think they would be concerned about the changes that we're going to implement.
Okay, so let me make sure I'm clear, because I'm not a lawyer. I just pretend to be one sometimes. So what I'm hearing now is there will be a substitute, but we won't have a committee substitute. We will have a floor substitute during perfection.
Yes.
Then when we finally pass the bill, it will have all the language that Mr. Salisbury feels that should be in it before it goes to the voters and be passed by and signed off by the mayor, right?
Correct.
That's correct.
Okay, I'm good. All right, thank you, Alderwoman Navarro, for clearing that up for me. I think Alderwoman Navarro, we were still kind of scratching our head like, I think I heard it right, I don't know. So anyway, Madam Chair, we're back to you to close. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Alderwoman Boyd has her hand up.
Thank you, Alderman Boyd. I just wanted to thank the Comptroller's Office, because as Alderman Boyd, I'm not a lawyer, and I'm not mechanically inclined when it comes to all of this language and numbers. But it seems like you all put a lot of work into this. So I appreciate it, the work that you're doing. So the Comptroller's Office has stepped up and out in regards to this. So thank you.
Thank you for that comment.
Yeah, thank you, Alderwoman.
All right, Alderwoman Davis, you're recognized to close on Board Bill 145.
I actually have one. I have my hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry, I did not see you. Alderman Vaccaro.
Because I guess my concerns, and I'll just tell you what my concerns are. Even I understand the floor substitute, but we're going to have a meeting tomorrow, which means this will get passed out tomorrow.
Not true.
If we do, it's going to get second read. Second read tomorrow.
Correct.
Perfected the day after tomorrow on Friday, which means we'll have a whole no day to try to figure out what's all in this floor substitute, unless this is going to be put on the informal calendar until this comes out. This is going to be a massive rush. Again, you got the meeting tomorrow, second read. Day after tomorrow, there's a meeting, and it'd be perfected. And I'm concerned that, so you're telling me we're going to have this thing, a substitute bill on Thursday, so that it would be perfected on Friday, and we'd have the time to actually read it? And he's saying, yes, I guess he's on the speed reading course, but I'm not. I'm more of a slow reader. I don't think that. Anyway, I would rather see the floor substitute, but that's me. That's my, I can't support this one without seeing the floor substitute. I don't like the timeline. I don't like the, now if the sponsor's telling me she's going to put it on the informal calendar for a week while we have the time to really look at this and make, a decision on the floor substitutes one thing, but I'd prefer, that I know what's in it. And the reason for some of us have been around a while, the one that didn't pass, we wanted to include that the neighborhoods, that the wards got money to fix the roads and stuff. And of course it didn't pass. And of course they came back and said, well, and it was just another one of those, let's just hurry up and do it thing. It's got time to make the April ballot, and I'd rather see the committee substitute so that I know what I'm voting on. But in my opinion, everybody's got the right to vote. I just wanted to say that. And again, if this was the normal, we got a meeting Friday, but we got this Friday, we got tomorrow and then this Friday. And actually probably no meeting till after the first of the year then. But it just seems like if we're going to get this today, it's going to be second read tomorrow and perfected on Friday with no time to read what a floor substitute or really be able to intelligently look at the changes. I'd want to see aligned, substitute. Anyway, everybody's got their own vote. I would want to see the committee substitute. I don't like voting on something that I'm not that's not complete, and we don't normally do that. So anyway, I'm gonna sit back and
And thank you, Alderman Vaccaro. And again, it is my understanding that the substitute would only have some technical corrections for the financial community to be able to be at absolute ease with what's being said. It does not substantially impact the rates on the bonds, the amount of the bonds requested, or any of that stuff. So Alderman Oldenburg.
Yeah, thank you, Alderman Boyd. I was just really going to amplify your point there. This is fairly common with tax exempt bonds, that they need to lock in more technical language before kind of getting the ballot language secured and or going to for offering. So this doesn't offend me to vote for it, knowing that bond counsel and the comptroller's office are representing to us here today that these aren't going to be substantive changes while to the terms of any other bonds that we've issued before in the city of St. Louis. So I take bond counsel as word that these will be minor and or technical changes that won't disrupt the typical terms we see in a bond. So I'd be comfortable voting for this today. Thank you.
Okay. I don't see any more hands. I'm trying to get to the chairperson to close. I don't see any hands. It's over with. I'm going to the chairperson to close on Board Bill 145. You're on mute, Chairwoman. Madam Chair, you're on mute.
I forgot. Okay. I wanted to make sure I didn't interrupt anybody. So I really do appreciate the thoroughness of this presentation. You took time to explain those things that do sound complicated. And you also took time to express the uniqueness of the position that we're in. Other than having the rare opportunities to do a minimal amount of capital improvements, we are in a unique position that will probably never be repeated. I mean, never. You all said maybe, but never. So it is important for us to be in alignment of understanding and taking our time to identify how these funds will be spent. We have identified the major categories through the public committee that made references to capital improvements through the mayor's office, and also the identified capital committee that Alderman Boyd and myself sit on. So those major categories are there for us. The other part to this too is that I always want to throw in a a simplistic way for the public who may be listening to understand the process when we issue these bonds and why we can say that there will be no additional taxation to you is because we are just like when you get a mortgage and a rate is set. And when you refinance, you take out your equity that is available to you. And usually it's a great benefit to you because you normally don't refinance until you're in a better position to do it. And maybe your rates will get lower. In this instance, it provides us with some additional funding to work on capital initiatives. We had a little concern, I heard, about assessed value for real property. And this has nothing to do with that process. That's an entirely different process that is done, and that deals with market value of real estate and the equity of a car. And you know that payment reduces as you pay your taxes every year. So those are things that we don't want to complicate this process by interjecting that at this moment. Also, I wanted to also say that the floor substitute will be available to you. You have the full understanding of what you anticipate seeing. It has been explained thoroughly. And I would hope that our bond counselor will have those things available to us as soon as possible, maybe even in 24 hours, you never know. So I feel as though I have an understanding, and I know that there will be no substantive change to the indication of need in this bill and the request. Remember, this is a request to get it on the ballot. We still have to come back for a lot of the specific things that people are talking about. So we'll be back to this committee several times, and we're just trying to get it on the ballot. And I do appreciate everybody's comments, and I am asking for a favorable vote to pass this with a do pass recommendation. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, I move that we pass Board Bill 145 out of committee with a do pass recommendation.
So move.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved in second. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderman Boyd,
Aye.
Alderman Vaccaro,
Pass.
Alderman Howard, Alderwoman Pam Boyd,
Aye.
Alderwoman Spencer,
Aye.
Alderman Muhammad, Alderman Oldenburg,
Aye.
Alderwoman Navarro,
Aye.
Alderwoman Middlebrook,
Aye.
Alderwoman Evans, Chairwoman Davis,
Aye.
Alderman Vaccaro,
I will be the one and only no, and I'll reconsider when I see the floor substitute, but no for now.
Alderwoman Howard, Alderman Muhammad, Alderwoman Evans. You have 7 aye votes.
By your vote, you have passed Board Bill 145 out of committee with a do pass recommendation. Now I shall turn the gavel back over to the chairperson, Alderwoman Davis.
Thank you very much for assisting me today. I do have, go back to the agenda items here. So I want to thank everybody for the passing my bill, and I do appreciate the fact that we have good committees that really delve in and get to the bottom of things. Thank you again. We have now to go down our list here. We have any committee discussion that needs to take place. If anybody has anything, any announcements. Hearing none, I'd like to excuse Alderwoman, I'm sorry, Howard and Alderwoman Evans for necessary absence. Mr. Clerk, you'll take note of that, please.
So noted.
And hearing nothing else, I move to adjourn this meeting.
Second.
All right.
Law.
Okay, thank you all very much.
Have a good evening, everybody.